Thank you, Dr. Mike Broda. You have a long history with WCCSD, and I'm honored to be invited here for this event. I see so many dear friends of WCCSD and the Pycroft Chair of Deaf Studies. Honorary members and faculty here, I wanted to let you know that I am an alumni of the University of Alberta. And you're right, Mike, I am a homegrown product. And I'd like to thank Deborah Russell, who's the current chair. She emailed me back in the fall and asked me if I would consider coming for this special event. And when I read what she said, this is 25 years? 25 years, and WCCSD is still alive and strong. I've certainly known this through my contacts over the years, but just to know how strong it is and how it has survived and grown. It's exam week now at the University of Zurich. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to make it. You know, as Roger mentioned, he was going to Hawaii, and I congratulate him on his 30 years. And for him, he's always put WCCSD first. And now it's my turn to put WCCSD first. I certainly understand and support him in his decision, but I had to do a little bit of logistical planning in order to make this happen. But I'm very happy to have come back home and to be using American Sign Language. Because when I think back to my early memories of WCCSD, I was part of that inaugural group. I'm not going to give any jokes. I think that Roger and Mike have done that enough. I do have many to share, but that's not my responsibility this evening. Here I am wanting to share with you an inspirational talk about where WCCSD has come from and where I think it's going in the future. So I would like you to sit back and enjoy my talk, but also at the same time think about the future of this very important chair and the Pycroft Chair of Deaf Studies. So I'm going to speak about where we have come from and where we are now tonight. And I'm looking around the room here, and I think about all of the people who aren't here tonight and aren't able to celebrate with us. But it is our personal responsibility to continue on our celebration with them, even in their absence. "25 years is a rich history. It's impossible to encompass all of that in a talk, in an evening talk. When I think back, perhaps it was wise, or maybe not wise. That's yet to be seen. But I want to draw on the alpha connections that we have made, starting with the relationships here in the community. And so that is how we're going to begin. I moved here from South Africa, and my first relationship, my first connection here was with the Alberta School for the Deaf. And that was the first time in my life that I was exposed to a bilingual education. I was taught sign language as well as written English. That became very important to recognize both of those languages. Now, at that time, WCCSD had not yet been established, but the University of Alberta was a strong presence at the School for the Deaf because teachers came there to do their training. So they certainly had a very important role, and as a student, I was one of the recipients of that education. At that time here in Canada, interpreters were not provided. I was restless. I wanted to move on with my career. And there was money that was raised for a group of students to go to Washington, Gallaudet University. And I'm not sure, if I go back in time, I think that I wish that I was here because I wish that there were more Canadian students. So that, because when I look at the inclusion that we have today compared to what was happening at my time, I had to go to another institution. I finished my studies at Gallaudet and I came back to Alberta wanting to make change. I had an ulterior motive when I came back, and that was to be affiliated with the university here. One of my very fond memories of Gallaudet University was meeting David and Polly Pykoff. There was a group called the Canadian Club for students, Canadian students who were attending Gallaudet University, and David and Polly were leaders of that club. And that was my first introduction to them. And they had an important message to convey to me and were an important part of my life, and I want to share that with you. When I was leaving Gallaudet, which was in 1985, Myrna's parents told me 3 important things. And they were foundational sentences for me, and I still recall them to this day. Communicate to the world. Knowledge is not to be kept. Knowledge is intended to be passed on. And knowledge is to be questioned and challenged. Don't just take what you know for granted. Make sure that you question that information. And that message has held with me, I have held with me to this day. And I think about how the world sees us. And really, Myrna, I have to thank your parents for that, because that has become an integral part of who I am, and it changed how I acted in the world. As Mike said, I do have memories of Roger, certainly. And so now, going on from alpha to beta, I want to talk about the beta connections and share my experience with you as a young person. And I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for Dr. Mike Rada. I had never called him Mike before until tonight. This is the first time that I have used that familiar term. I always had such respect for him. And I have some photos I'd like to share with you. I have moved many times, and as those of you who have moved, you know that things get lost in boxes, but fortunately I was able to find a picture. And these pictures are from the early stages of the development of WCCSD. I have many of them, but these are some of the ones that I chose. So this is what you were like, Mike, back in those days, is it not? It's certainly a depiction that I recall. I see him as a man of words. His words become action until they are until the action is completed. I observed his technique. I observed his creative dialogue, his diplomacy, and I have taken that to the university in Zurich. Thank you, Mike, for that. I know that he was always on the phone when I would walk into his office. If I could bump into him in the hallway, that was a great opportunity for me. Regardless of our level of communication, his limited sign language, I still communicated with him, and it was a great opportunity to do so whenever I could. And as Mike sat, behind him was Roger, and I think of Roger as a man of action. He was a leader. He initiated things. Definitely. I learned a lot from him. He was the one who could then take those words, the words of Mike, the man of words, and move them into action. We were a great team. We worked together very well, Roger and I. Pardon me, he was part of a great team, that was an interpreter error, and worked with this person who's next. Here's an example of us working together, sharing ideas. So the ideas would come from Mike, and then they would come to us, to Roger and I, and we would look at how we could fit those ideas within the terms or the needs of the deaf community. And we would sit like that for hours on end. Often we wouldn't even break for lunch. We would go to meetings, and then we would come back and continue our discussion about how we were going to implement these ideas or plan for a presentation out in the community. And that gives you an idea of how we were working together at that time. And now, for the next important person of our team, Gloria Mercier. It is so nice to see you tonight. When you came up to accept your flowers, I'm asking you, Gloria, do you remember this picture? I recall her as being the lady in charge. She was very organized. It was a bit of a chaotic center, but she was the one who would take all of that chaos and put it in order. Certainly an important person in our office. And as I just mentioned, us talking about these brainstorming sessions and how we were going to get our ideas out there and share them with the community, she was the one that was instrumental in allowing us to do that. So I have a very fond memory of Marion Nicely. She was responsible for the disability services here at the university and provided great support. Unfortunately, a few weeks ago she left this earth, but I know that she's here watching us this evening. You know, it's interesting, when I was looking through those pictures, we would often talk about how to convince other post-secondary institutions that they needed to provide access for deaf and hard of hearing students, because there were a lot of barriers at that time, and we talked about strategies about how we would provide that access. And we would go to other universities and talk to them with an interpreter, of course. We were making breakthroughs. And I think that this poster that's behind us here in this picture is perfect. It says, "Your attitude is showing." And that summer, that was the campaign for the University of Alberta, and it's a perfect photo for the two of us there. So Marion, she was another partner and certainly an important part of the team. Influenced a lot of post-secondary institutions in Western Canada. Tanya Adler, she is here with us tonight. Tanya, I would consider as an intermediary. She was the administrative assistant. She would take these ideas that we had and try to figure out, okay, this is what this means, this is how it needs to happen. She would ask for clarification. She would, when she didn't understand, she would get the clarification that she needed. And so thank you, Tanya, for being that intermediary for us. She was a very young woman at that time. She was writing a script, I recall. It was a presentation for the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology. Oh, pardon me, that was me there writing the script. That was the interpreter error. At the time that WCCSD was being established, we also talked about how to establish the chair of deaf studies and how they're going to work in tandem. And I think of this as a delta connection. I'm really proud to see the role that Edmonton and Alberta has played in providing services and providing a research chair to disseminate information. And I'm sure that throughout this evening you'll see examples of how they have done that. When I think of the symbol of a delta, imagine a river, and U of A is the river, and they are the one that is responsible for sending that knowledge out, much the same at the end of a delta, where it moves out into the ocean, and there's no going back. You can't back up in a river, much the same as the role that the University of Alberta has played. There is no going back now. Deborah asked me about the future of WCCSD and the Pycroft Chair and its role. So I thought of this as a zeta connection. Of course, there's no discussion that WCCSD is needed to continue. That's not in question at all, much the same as I was speaking of about the delta and the river. We must keep going. The Western Sign Language community needs to take the responsibility to ask the university questions. They need to bring their needs forward. The roles need to change for the questions and the issues and the discussion to come from the Western Sign Language community to the university. And I think that that should be the new role for the deaf community. And then when I also think about the Canadian international scientific community, I think about our connection to Switzerland. Certainly Canada and Switzerland have a connection, and that is a connection to the broader international community. And then we need to then think about how to share our knowledge and skills with the rest of the world. Canada is very humble, and the Pycroft Chair has always been very humble. I don't think that we need to be humble, or you need to be humble anymore. You need to show the world what you have done and what you can continue to do. And now for our ETA connections. That's all of you here tonight. I have a gift for you. The 3 R's. You might be familiar with the common understanding of the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, but I have a new set of 3 R's for you tonight. Reflection, reframing, and redefining. Redefining the role of WCCSD. And so, as part of this celebration tonight, I want you to think about the spirit of the future. So now for reflection. As you're sitting here tonight in this moment of history, I want you to look back and think about why the center was established here in Edmonton at the University of Alberta. Give that some thought. What resources were available 25 years ago? Perhaps other universities had similar resources, but why did it happen here? Look at this place, this location, and all the people that are here tonight, all the people who had the faith, supported the dream, and made it into reality. There are pioneer spirits that made this happen 25 years ago and is still here today, and I expect it will be here for much longer. Now the second R, reframing. When we think about people themselves, deaf or hard of hearing, nothing has really changed. But what has changed is the paradigm shift of the understanding of those who cannot hear about people who are deaf and hard of hearing. And that paradigm shift is integral. I believe that the Pycroft Chair, as well as WCCSD, have played a very important role in reframing in that paradigm shift. And sign language is now recognized as a dimension of human language due to the research and further cultural understanding. And that took place here at the center, and it continues to grow. As Roger said, the center is going to be around for another 50 or 100 years, and spoke of how the funding is now secure, the endowment is well in place. So now we need to think about redefining the role of WCCSD. Deborah asked me what I thought based on my research in Switzerland, and I thought I would take a moment to share some information with you about what's happening in Switzerland and how that may apply to some action here in Canada. When we think about a new definition, we need to consider the role of the university. And one of the most important things is an inclusive society for all. Not an inclusive society for a particular group, but an inclusive society for all. And that involves self-determination. Whether it be somebody who is elderly and having a difficult time with their vision, whether it be somebody from another culture, they need to have the opportunity for self-determination. And the scientific knowledge we know that it's published in English, but one of the ways that we could change this is that it could become a digital documentation in sign language, showing that sign language is equivalent to English. We are trying that now in Switzerland, and we know that written language is very paramount within the academic community. But if we are going to redefine something, we need to give sign language the same opportunity as written language and spoken English. That written language and spoken language have, and I see a lot of nods in the room here when I'm making this comment, and so certainly I see that there's a lot of agreement. I wanted to share with you my perceptions as an outsider. In Switzerland, we have two university systems. One is more theoretically based, similar to the University of Alberta. And then we have an applied university that offers BAs and MAs. The theoretical university offers the PhD. And when I think here of the University of Alberta, or pardon me, the University of Applied Science in Zurich, we're now moving towards taking those skills and moving them out into the everyday community, and I'll speak a little bit more about that in a moment. The University of Applied Science is an application that's a practical orientation, for example, in engineering, community or computer science, business management. And we also have conference interpreting at the University of Applied Science. And once somebody has finished their degree, they can go out and work immediately in the community. There's a high degree of practical training. So there's a combination of study as well as a practical component. And in that conclusion, the thesis, it focuses on experiences in the profession. So there's a strong relation to the practical component and the thesis. And as far as research and development, it's based on the applied scientific knowledge. It's peer-reviewed, and it's very important that government and other cultural institutions are involved. And most people graduate from the applied science institution, and most of them have jobs immediately after graduating. And I think maybe the university here could think about that.
And so how would we see it working at Zurich University of Applied Sciences? we have BA and MA students, and we are also working with Gallaudet University. We work with Hamburg, and we also provide sign language training for interpreters and for teachers. And so we're thinking about maybe having a partnership in the future with U of A and Zurich University of Applied Sciences. Right now, U of A has a partnership with Ukraine, and we're looking for something similar at Zurich. I've noticed that sign language research has happened across the world in different countries, but not as much cultural research. And so that's another goal, is that we would open up more research opportunities in looking at our actual culture and community and studying those aspects of it. And so there's been a new project that's been founded, and we will be getting money for this. That money comes from the Swiss National Science Foundation, and so that will be moving forward. And we have different sponsors. And so that might be an encouragement for here as well, to look at corporations outside of the university to provide sponsorship and funding for such projects and research. When I was reading through the monograph for WCCSD, I saw many applications, many links, things that I could provide that we've done in Zurich. For example, we've done qualitative research. We've looked at children, not only in schools, but the forgotten aspect, which is the psychological and the social aspects that happen outside of the classroom. And so there's going to be a second qualitative research project focusing on that control group. The UN Convention of Rights with Persons with Disabilities. We need to look at how that's going to affect research, and it needs to be followed up. And so that's another encouragement for U of A, that we look towards that Convention of Rights. The other applied research project that we have is a contribution of audiological and speech therapy. And that training is with integration. My last piece that I wanted to give to you tonight is a tribute to WCCSD. And I wanted to do a poem tonight. It's a William Wordsworth poem. I learned it as a student back in '75, when I was just a young kid. I remember how difficult English was at that time for me. And when David asked me to come and speak here tonight for this anniversary, I thought of this poem, partly because of spring, and it's about daffodils, but also just the application to us and who we are in the future. And so I'd like to think about how we're celebrating now, but how are we going to move forward? And so this was published in 1804, and I feel that it still applies to us today. For those of us who are deafened, hard of hearing, William Wordsworth himself
I want to draw an analogy with this poem before I go ahead. And the daffodils actually represent the deaf and hard of hearing community. And the University of Alberta, and all of you here this evening, are the author of this poem, William Wordsworth. And when you think about what state he was at. He was in a place of solitude. And when you think of deaf people, they often are in a place of solitude. And now I want you to keep in mind those 3 R's that I asked you to think about. And I'm going to interpret this poem, and the interpreters are going to follow along with the English. They hopefully will be able to stay on track with me, but just so you know, they may be a little ahead of me or a little behind me at times. But keep in mind our current situation as I share with you this poem. I wander, lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze, continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way. They stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. "10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. For oft, when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils."